Hello and welcome to Casual Krakoa. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of Comic Book Herald.com. Thanks everybody for joining this evening. Today we're going to talk about X Lives of Wolverine number 3 and X-Men number 8, the two X-Men books that came out today, as well as any listener questions that you have. We talk about some other stuff that's going on in the world of X and comics and just nerd culture in general. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing. You can find my stuff at comicbookherald.com. Go to comicbookherald.com for all sorts of great reading orders, guides, analysis, pretty much anything you'd be interested in comics related. We've got it there. Go check it out. We got some good stuff up today and every day. If you are here with us live, please let me know if you can hear and see everything all right in the chat. That is also where you can get in your questions. We definitely should have time for questions today, so get some in the chat if you like. Super Chat is open and available if you're feeling generous, like donating to Comic Book Herald. That is greatly appreciated, and I will, of course, prioritize all and any questions that I see there. But otherwise, if there are no issues, we should be good to go ahead and dive in today. A pretty light day of comics. You know, I think the X Lives weeks right now are definitely, they just feel lighter, right? By nature of not dealing with stuff that's going on with Moira, by stuff that's going on in the present tense of Krakoa. You know, X Lives of Wolverine just feels less essential, less mandatory, I think, in a lot of ways. I think it is doing the job that it is setting out. You know, it is accomplishing the goals that it is setting for itself fairly well. I think I actually like X Lives of Wolverine more and more as the series has progressed, frankly. After being very disappointed with the first issue by the time we're here, and now that I know what to expect and what this book is, I thought issue 3 has some interesting moments. It's not extraordinary. It's not. It didn't make me ecstatic in any capacity. But again, this is what I expect of it now, which is to be the continuation of Ben Percy's run on Wolverine and X-Force, right? X Lives of Wolverine is Wolverine issues 20 through 22 or whatever, right? It is just an extension of the Wolverine and of that run that's been happening up to this point. And I think if you put it in those terms, if you put it in that context, I'd be sitting here saying, hey, Wolverine's pretty interesting right now. I like what's going on there in that book. I like how it's progressed and built over this really long combined run between Wolverine and X-Force. But when you put it in the terms, again, of X Lives event status, right? 10-issue weekly event, bouncing week to week between lives and death issues, and then building ultimately towards March's Destiny of X, which is, in my opinion, kind of can't come fast enough. I do think we are in a moment right now where X Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine is what is supposed to hold us between Inferno ending and kicking off this new era, the Destiny of X. Now, again, it's one of those things where, in retrospect, when we look back on this and readers are binging this on Marvel Unlimited and collected trades, this stuff won't matter, right? These are the problems of individuals reading these things on an issue, floppy by floppy, basis, week to week, right? But I think there's this is going to feel long. I think it's going to feel like a long gap between Inferno and Destiny of X. And in some ways, that's totally fine. In some ways, that's totally fine. And I'm seeing here in the comments here, I cannot believe the editors froze the start of Destiny of X for a week Wolverine event. Let's talk about that, because I was thinking about this today, actually, as well. X Lives and X Deaths is not good enough, frankly, to pause the whole line of X-Men comics. Now, that is not what is happening, right? The line of X-Men comics is not paused. We're in a weird limbo between Reign of X and Destiny of X. I'm very excited for Destiny of X to start in earnest, because we're going to have Kieran Gillen come on board with Immortal X-Men, a book I'm really looking forward to. We're going to have Al Ewing relaunch, the Sword book is X-Men Red, right? There's going to be interesting stuff that comes out of the Destiny of X, and also just sort of that declaration of yes, we are now in, I don't know that we call it Act 3, but we're now in Act 1.3, probably most likely, of the Krakoa era of X-Men. And we don't really get to that until this series is over, but New Mutants just came out with an issue, right? X-Men has an issue today, right? The other books that are going to continue and carry through into the Destiny of X, it's not those are actually on pause. It's not actually a House of X and a Powers of 10 situation where everything shut down for this moment, for this thing to happen. And obviously, the marketing around Lives and Deaths of Wolverine of being like, oh, a weekly event, just like House of X and Powers of 10. Like, obviously, it is nowhere close. Like, clearly, it is not even in the same ballpark. I'm seeing Brandon say here in the chat, the stalling of X. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but like, we've been in the stalling of X for months, realistically. It's something I've been addressing on these Casual Krakoas for months now, is the latter half of the reign of X was the stalling of X. I mean, absolutely. And a lot of that was intentional on the part of the creators. It wasn't just for lack of ideas or for lack of story. A lot of that was like pandemic influenced, right? And just schedules and things getting messed up and all those outside influences that made it difficult. And then you have Hickman leaving on top of that. So they're planning for, okay, when can these stories actually kick in? I guess the reason the Destiny of X in part feels so exciting in March is because that has been billed, and this could be a false billing, we'll find out, right? But that has definitely been billed as, okay, all that stuff you've been waiting for, all the stuff we've been planning for, that's when it's going to hit. It's going to hit in March with the Destiny of X. We're really going to get this train rolling. Everything is that you've been waiting for is finally going to start moving forward in all the exciting ways. That's the promise of the Destiny of X right now. And frankly, it has to deliver. It has to deliver on that, because otherwise, like, a lot of readers, myself included, are going to be like, all right, I'm out. Like, you said you had the goods. Let's see them now. Let's see some of them. Doesn't have to be everything, but let's see some of them. Otherwise, okay, it was fun. It was a fun idea. It was great potential with House and Powers. It didn't pay off. That's what the story's going to be. That's what the narrative's going to be if Destiny of X does not deliver. That's the pressure on the X office, on the creators right now, is it's a put up or shut up moment, I think, for sure, for Destiny of X. Like, House and Powers had the moment in 2019. It's been a minute. It has been a minute. Maybe it feels like literally a minute because the world's been so weird since then. But like, it has been a while since House and Powers. And yes, of course, there's been cool stuff in between. There have been good runs in between, right? Like Hellions is a run that, regardless of how the Krakoa era shakes out, I'm always going to point back to readers and say, like, hey, check out the 18 issues of Hellions that happened during the Krakoa era. You could say that about some other stuff going on. Maybe Sword falls into that category. I think the Vida Ayala and Rod Rice, I really need to go back to my interview with Rod and listen to how I'm supposed to pronounce that last name, because I feel myself oscillating every time I say it. And he's kind enough to come hang out and listen to the chat sometimes. I'm going to go back and listen as soon as I'm done here, I promise, because I feel badly about oscillating on the pronunciation there. But that run on New Mutants, that's going to fit, right? So there's comics that are going to come out of this that are going to be fine. And again, like on average, this is the most consistently interesting a whole line of X-Men comics have been in my lifetime. So that's very cool. That's all very good, right? Like, people get freaked out when I start talking about, like, possibly checking out an X-Men comics or wanting more from them. People are like, oh, be patient. Oh, just wait, just wait, just enjoy the comics. And like, that's what I try to do, right? That's what I try to do. And sometimes it's good advice, frankly, right? You got to take a step back. But Destiny of X, it has to be the moment. It just does. If it cannot deliver, if it feels like we're kicking the can down the road again, then I'm going to be like, okay, I'm out. But I'm saying that as I expect that it will be. I have optimism. I have expectations that it will be able to deliver on that hype, on those expectations. Okay. And I also do want to say, like, as I started this off as kind of just because X Lives of Wolverine 3 it's a middle of the road book for me. This event is like generally pretty good, right? We're halfway through this. The X Death stuff I think is really fascinating. There's a lot going on there that I'm very curious to see how it plays out. X Lives of Wolverine is not as fascinating to me. But that said, now that I know what it is and now that I know what the expectations are, I think it is like it is certainly competently put together. There's some interesting stuff going on in these comics. So like, I'm not checked out on X Lives and X Deaths by any measure. I think it's gonna, like, again, and I was thinking about this with X-Men number 8 today. And X-Men number 8, I think, is another just very like blah, like very middle of the road, average superhero comic. But if you stack that up against what Marvel pumps out on a week-to-week cadence, it's upper tier standard Marvel superhero stuff. In the case of X-Men, this is something I talk about a lot, where it's like, when I compare that to what the book was in the Hickman reign and what the potential of the book was more than anything. Because I actually don't think the Hickman run is like phenomenal or anything, but the potential of that run was so high. And then the Duggan, Larraz, Javier Pena, Marty Gracia run, it's just not trying to do that at all, right? It's just your standard Marvel superhero kind of comic, but compare it to superhero team books that are coming out right now, and it's like it's better than Avengers, it's better than Fantastic Four, it's not as good as Eternals, wildly enough, but like it's upper tier team superhero stuff. Because the Krakoa era is full of such potential and such exciting moments, I'm just always pushing for and hoping for more. And I don't think either of the comics today hit that. I don't think either of the comics today hit on a I'm excited coming out of reading that level, the way that I am reading, any number of other comics that I've read recently. The Human Target by Tom King and Greg Smallwood. That got me fired up. I'm excited about The Human Target. Less so with Batman, Catwoman, and Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow so far, right? But that got me fired up. Monkey Meat by Junie Bott, Image Comic Series. That got me fired up, right? Comics that hit and you're like, oh, okay, this is a special one. This one I'm going to want to stick around for. I'm going to want to read it again. I'm going to want to rank this highly on the best comics of all time list. That sort of thing, right? Nothing like that today. But there's plenty to talk about, okay? So let's talk about what actually happened here in X Lives of Wolverine number 3. Again, get in your questions, get in your thoughts here in the comments, and I will try to pick up on as many as I see that makes sense. So, yeah, I mean, I'm seeing the comment here. I think we're going to be okay. Hickman left, but his storytelling plans have been delivered to the X office. There's amazing creators in the room. Gillen, Ewing, Ayala. Yeah, like that's my general attitude. Truly, like I do actually feel that way about the destiny of X, right? Like the blueprint, as we've been told, has been shared. There's talent in the room to make those things happen. It's just a matter of like actually putting the pedal to the metal a little bit. I really don't even think it's a question of can they deliver so much as will there be a general tone, where there'll be a general sort of editorial, not mandate, but like guidance that is like, take it easy, be patient, we're doing great. Everybody take your time. That will be the death of this. I think, they have to come in and they have to hit it, and they have to hit it hard. And I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that can happen. I do think we're in, again, like the Krakoa era of X-Men comics, even at its most static, is interesting, and there's going to be interesting stuff if you're an X-Men fan in general. So all right, so let's talk about what happens in X Lives of Wolverine number 3. Writer Benjamin Percy, artist Joshua Cassar, colors by Frank Martin, letters by Corey Pettit, and definitely got to say too, like, okay, I talk about this in like not feeling like an event book, maybe, in terms of like weight or status or comparisons to House and Powers. Joshua Cassar and Frank Martin, the art, event level, right? I love Cassar and Martin together. Fantastic artistic pairing, and they're killing it here. They really get a chance to shine on a few moments in issue number 3, including Omega Dick, which is Moby Dick, but Omega Red style. There's really good splash panel of a full page splash of Wolverine getting possessed by Omega Red. Oh, BT dubs. If you haven't read these comics, if you haven't read them, we're going to talk about them as if you have, because I have, right? This is a full spoiler conversation. Okay, so if you have not read these comics and you don't want to know what happened so far, this is probably not the conversation for you. Come back later after you've read them. If you don't care or you already have, cool. That's how we're going to approach this conversation. Okay, so in X Lives of Wolverine number 3, right up front, right in the credits page, we get 8 of Logan's lives detailed in the credits. Okay, we get Logan 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, and 10. And I think at this point, we've mostly seen like all of the Logans. Like this isn't going to be a situation like Moira, where her lifelines are mysterious. And for a long time in House and Powers, we didn't know what life number 6 was going to be, right? Or like what anything about the lifelines, because it was all new to us. Logan's lifelines, we know. We know this through like Logan's history as as a character in the Marvel Universe. There's actually a fairly useful right now series going on Marvel Unlimited, if you have a subscription, called The Life of Wolverine. It's written by Jim Zub, who's done a bunch of Marvel comics, and it's one of their webtoon-esque scrollers. And it's a fairly useful, just like recap of Wolverine's history as told through a bazillion comics throughout the years in, relative chronological order. I actually, after reading today's issue, I went and read the last few of those, and there was a moment in there that I was like, oh yeah, that happened with a certain character that we'll talk about here in a moment. So I would actually recommend those if you were like, I don't know anything about Wolverine's time in Canada, the American West, World War I, like all the old stuff, right? I know Wolverine on the X-Men. That's great. Everything else, like, where is that coming from? Those Life of Wolverine things, they're short, they're sweet. It's a fairly effective and easy recap. I would kind of recommend it. Okay. But so like we know this Logan, we know the timeline. Logan X, Logan 10 in the Lives of Wolverine, that's present day Logan. Like there's no mystery, there's no future Logan that we don't know about. Even right now, I don't think there's like a past we don't know about at this stage. I think it would have been cooler if there was. But that's not the game we're playing here, okay? We're just playing with the full scope of Wolverine's history. And again, like in X Lives, because we have Cassara and Martin, we get to have these like metal, really cool looking moments, like I said, with like Omega Dick, right? This whale come bursting out of the Canadian ice. It's fun as hell. Like Cassara and Martin getting to flex is always a great thing. I feel like Percy's Wolverine is actually right on the edge of that sort of fall metal, over the top approach to comics that like Scott Snyder and Jason Aaron leaned into hard, starting in like 2018. And generally, Percy pulls back in time. I will say sometimes he doesn't. Like for example, an adamantium surfboard with claws on it, I would say, is a moment where he didn't pull back in time. But in this instance, they didn't pull back. They did not pull back on the Omega Whale and the book benefits, right? So like that was actually super fun, and I loved it. X Lives Wolverine's in interesting territory. Wolverine's actions. So okay, the lifeline that the timeline that we ended X Lives Wolverine number 2 on was Logan V, we're calling it Logan 5, and he's in Japan with his wife at the time, Itsu. And his actions here with her determined the fate of Duggan's mother. Okay, Itsu is Duggan's mother, and she is pregnant here in these scenes with little baby Duggan, the son of Wolverine, who was revealed in the 2000s in Wolverine Origins to be this, secret long lost son of Wolverine. Is obviously a player, right? Has been in X Factor, where the character was sort of redeemed and sort of revitalized by writer Lee Williams, and is now an interesting player, with the Wolverines in the X-Men space. So we have kind of an interesting time travel thing here, where it's like if Wolverine kills the Omega Red possessed version of his wife in the past, that kills her and like Duggan, right? So that might like eradicate his son from the future. And I'd say obviously Wolverine doesn't want that to happen. It might not be that obvious because like technically he has killed Duggan before, but in this instance he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't actually want to do that. So it's fairly stock and trade time travel stuff, like this is Back to the Future, right? You go back and change things and you disappear from the timeline. It's that, but like we're actually doing it, right? And it's good that we're having these conversations because, as I talked about, with Age of Ultron and any situation, anytime Wolverine goes into the past, things tend to go very poorly. Okay, so like opening that up, I think, is a smart thing. There's the most interesting moment, by far, is Wolverine struggling to figure out what to do about the situation where Omega Red has possessed his pregnant wife in the past. And Professor X is talking to Jean Grey in present day. They're the two psychics that are sending Wolverine back. They're sending his consciousness back. And Professor X says, I don't know, perhaps if we had a Cerebro stored in a black hole. What? Where is this coming from? So there's all of a sudden, in the middle of this issue, just subtly, we're just dropping in black hole potential for the Krakoa X-Men. Okay, why is this so strange and interesting aside from just being totally out of the blue and a huge science fiction concept that gets zero explanation? Well, as we probably remember from House of X and Powers of 10, black holes are discussed as a form of potential travel between, out of time, out of spaces. It's covered as a core part of the science fiction, the heavy science fiction in Powers of 10. Obviously, one of my favorite theories, and one I talk about all the time, is like the potential of Zorn and Rasputin, these characters from Moira's ninth life, the life where she teams up with Apocalypse. They get lost. They get sucked into a black hole with actually Omega Sentinel of that lifeline. And there's obviously a lot of potential because of the way black holes are talked about in this book and just sort of my vague science fiction understanding of them, that they could travel through that like to the present lifeline, right? Or that they could still be out there somewhere. So Professor X opening up like, hey, let's drop one of my fun hats into a black hole. Like, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. The X-Men of the present day have not played with, have not touched black holes and their potential at all. Since when was that an option? Is one of my favorite questions here. I mean, I really dig Sage has some logbook analysis of timeline anomalies because, good Lord, somebody needs to be keeping track of all this. And again, as usual, Wolverine playing with time is getting super messy. But again, there's an action item in this logbook to store Cerebro in a black hole. So, like, we're just doing this then? Like, it's like just a thing that we can do? How? It feels like one of those, I feel like concepts like this could use some internal consistency and build. Like, how would we build to the moment of storing Cerebros in black holes, given how big that is for anyone who's been playing along the whole time? Which, like, if you're reading X Lives and X Deaths without the context of, like, House and Powers, like who are you? Like, what is that experience? I would love to hear about that because that seems preposterous to me. It's like this thing we hit now with the MCU where, and I know people like this, I have family like this, where they're like, yeah, like Endgame was my first movie. I'm just like, what? Like, it just breaks my brain. Like, it just absolutely breaks my brain that there are people who are like, oh yeah, I've seen Iron Man 2, I've seen Eternals, and that's it. It's like, what? How are those the movies you've seen? So anyway, if you're reading only X Lives and X Deaths, no judgment. I just want to know that you exist. Go ahead and say something in the chat. But like, we know black holes are a big deal. That like suggests a lot. The X-Men readers who have been here for a minute, how are we doing that? Okay, and like, truly, I don't want that to just be an aside. I don't want that to just be an aside. Like, that's a big thing to be talking about. I don't think it's actually going to be a part of this book because basically they're like, oh, we could do that, but we don't have time. But that hopefully that gets developed moving forward now that we've thrown it out there. And it makes me think, as we're talking about, like, why am I still excited for the Destiny of X? Stuff like that, where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe we can just like start moving these things. Maybe we can start talking about how black holes are going to be used. Maybe we can start talking about the phalanx. Maybe we can start talking about galactic societies, all these cool powers of 10 ideas and whatnot. That would be great. That would be a good thing. So even though I don't think it's going to be a big part of this comic, I do think it's like a positive direction overall for the X-Men line. So, a couple additional thoughts on X Lives. I don't know that the how of it is demonstrably clear, but we get confirmation here that Mikhail Rasputin sends Omega Red on the journey through history using his powers. Mikhail Rasputin's powers are reality warping and the Cerebro Sword. Some combination of those two things allow Omega Red to do what he's doing, which is he is invasion of the body snatchering through the past, trying to outpace Wolverine, initially just trying to kill some version of Professor X in a past timeline or members of the Xavier clan, because that would prevent Professor X from coming into existence, which would, to the minds of Mikhail and Omega Red, prevent Krakoa from ever coming to fruition, which, as a premise, I actually think would be a lot of fun to explore in more detail. Okay? Now, like, as we understand it, like, is that probably true? Probably. But here's the thing, like, Moira X is the driver, right, of Krakoa. Could she not team with Magneto? If Professor X is killed as a baby, does no one possibly take his place as sort of a ringleader or a guide of mutant kind? I mean, obviously, like, this is territory that we've seen explored before, right? Like, in the Age of Apocalypse, Professor X dies later in life. He's already had a significant influence, but even there, then you see when he dies, then you see Magneto take over as leader of the X-Men. So, like, I actually really like playing out this thought experiment of, like, well, if you kill him, there's no Krakoa. Is that true? Is that actually true? I don't know that it is. We're really, I think, taking that probably for granted. But I think, bringing the Cerebro Sword back, which is a thing that is stolen in the pages of X-Force, and we know Rush has had for a while now, using that in whatever the heck capacity it's supposed to be used here to send Omega Red along, okay, sure, it's a comic, I'll take it, I'll accept it. And what Omega Red kind of starts doing here in issue number 3 is, instead of just trying to kill Professor X in all these various timelines, now he's like, well, I probably also should just kill and mess with Wolverine's life because he's chasing me, right? So now it kind of opens up that bag of worms as well. The other, I guess, big thing that happens here is Mother Flippin' Romulus shows up, which is hilarious to me. If you don't know Romulus, obviously you're not a true Wolverine fan. No, kidding. Romulus is a mid-2000s attempt to give Wolvie a new arch villain who's there for the character's development, for their developing like memories and origins, right? So post House of M, the event in 2004, 2005, Wanda, No More Mutants, all that, Wolverine regains his memories, or at least access to them. And that kicks off a series called Wolverine Origins, and that coincides with the ongoing Wolverine. And it kicks off with Romulus straight up removing Duggan from Itsu's womb and raising him as his own. Like, that's where that storyline begins. That's what that comes from. That's Romulus stuff. Basically, Romulus is Sabretooth messing with Wolverine's entire life, but trying way too hard. Like you've heard the term try hard, like Romulus, that it was about him. Like, that's where that term comes from. Romulus is not cool. Romulus is not interesting. I do not like Romulus stories, if that is unclear. That said, I thought him showing up here was hilarious. It fits in the timeline. And if you're going to do anything at all with Romulus, this is the space and the moment to do it. It's a character that exists in Wolverine's past. I don't care to see Romulus in the present day. Although I am curious, like, would he be allowed in Krakoa, all that stuff. But, like, this is the space to do it. So I thought that was very funny and frankly, a fine, nice touch. I will say, so there's a moment where Wolverine's like, what do I do? Jean, help me. I don't want to kill my wife because, one, that's emotional, but two, she's pregnant. And then Jean shows up and she's like, trying to help, whatever. Romulus shows up, distracts everyone. And then after Wolverine scares off Romulus and scratches him up all good, then suddenly Itsu's not possessed by Omega Red anymore. I probably missed a beat reading quickly, but I didn't actually get like when Omega Red bailed on Itsu there. So if anyone has that obvious maybe detail, definitely drop that into the chat because I missed that one. But whatever, you knew it wasn't going to happen anyway. Even though, like, I actually think one of the most interesting things X Lives could do is be like Wolverine, be like, I have no choice. I have to kill Duggan again. Do I actually want that to happen? No. But like that sort of choice, that sort of like ramification of like, yeah, and this is actually going to mess with mutants from the future. Now we got to fix that. Like, those are some wild potential avenues this type of comic could be going down. I mean, like, here's the thing is, I'm seeing a question here. Romulus is Sabretooth? No, like, that was a metaphor. Romulus is not literally Sabretooth. He is just the same kind of character, the same idea in terms of antagonist. Okay. But like, here's the thing is, like, we're 50% of the way through this storyline, right? Like, we're 5 issues in now. We've got 3/5 of X Lives, and I don't, with X Deaths, I think has secrets. X Deaths has mystery. X Lives, 3/5 of the way through, it's kind of like, I don't know, like, it doesn't feel like it has another gear, or if it does, it should have dropped it by now. It just feels like it's, again, like it's just doing a Wolverine goes back and tries to protect Professor X in time thing, which on its face is fine. It allows you to explore this long history of the character, but I would have liked a twist. I would have liked something a bit different in there. I think to send it over the top. I don't think it's over the top. It's not over the edge. And I think that's why, I'm seeing it in the chat, and I'm definitely on this reaction as well, where it's just like, yeah, all right, okay. Like, I'm definitely, when I see it's an X Deaths Wolverine week, I'm perking up. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's see what's going to happen here. When I see it's X Lives, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I won't have to do a video that week. I'll just do a live stream. It's not going to be as big a thing, and that's kind of a bummer. So, all right, get in some questions, get in some thoughts, and then we'll jump into X-Men and see what's coming next. Seeing the art in X Lives rules, totally agree. Kasara and Martin are awesome. When is the next update to the Marvel Reading Order Fresh Start Guide coming? That's a good question. So over on comicbookherald.com, you can find reading orders for pretty much everything. For Fresh Start, I have hit a pause. So, like, obviously, like, if you're following X-Men, out of Fresh Start, you can just jump straight into the Hickman, Krakoa era X-Men. I've got literally everything there. Every issue in order, every event, etc., etc. I've continued pace with the events in the Marvel Universe throughout the Fresh Start, but I think the actual Fresh Start guide itself probably stops circa, like, I don't know. It's been a while now. But yeah, an update will be coming. I think, to try to squeeze everything in there. That I'm hoping to have within the next few months. I've got some help. That's definitely not something I can take on myself with everything else I'm trying to do. But yeah, I hope to have that at some point. So let's see. How in the hell has this guy not picked up more subscribers? Great question. Fantastic question. I appreciate the support. It's always like a weird, like, backhanded compliment when people are like, I can't believe you know more subs. And it's like on one hand, it's like super flattering because it's like you like the channel and you want to see more people subscribe, which is super nice. But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I'm just not that popular. These things happen. Like, I think a big part of it actually is I'm not that committed to like pumping out content, as you may know. I'll talk about stuff when I have stuff to talk about, but like I do a lot of stuff. And Comic Book Herald keeps me busy as a website. I've got podcasts like My Marvelous Year that keep me busy. I've got projects like Hickmania. Check it out. We just had the Pax Romana video go up. But YouTube is like another thing. It's not the only thing. So I appreciate the compliment there. But yeah, and tell a friend, right? Maybe we can get a few more subscribers. But I've basically seen that since I had like 30 subscribers. People being like, how do you not have more? So like, I feel like that question is always there. But it's yeah, like I needed a cartoon sidekick. That's a great idea. I'm not opposed, absolutely. Just marketing in general is suggested. Thank you for that. When mutants hit the MCU, the algorithm will kick in. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is like the YouTube channel has, as you all know, like obviously I'm doing Casual Krakoa, the YouTube channel has become pretty exclusively like X-Men talk, And I've talked about this before, but like that was never my thing before I started doing videos. Like it kind of just coincides with like I started doing Road to Hickman's X-Men stuff because I like Hickman as a creator and his Marvel Universe stuff. And then it just sort of coincided with love for X-Men and the direction of the project to the point now that like I think a lot of people and probably a lot of you are like, yeah, Comic Book Herald is an X-Men channel, but that's never been my thing on Comic Book Herald, which is like pretty full guides to the Marvel Universe. I've got a lot of DC Universe stuff on there, and just comics analysis and just like, reviews of a whole bunch of other stuff that I like even more. So absolutely, mutants in the MCU would help. That said, like, I don't know, I don't do that much MCU coverage, right? Like, I love the Illuminati. I got all sorts of Illuminati thoughts. But the second I see them in a Doctor Strange trailer, I'm not like rushing, away from my family to make a video or whatever, which is like, these are personal choices, you make these. Definitely my biggest, not my biggest regret, but a regret that I have doing Comic Book Herald is I assumed the barriers to entry with YouTube stuff were way greater than they actually are, right? For years. And if I had realized circa like 2014, as Comic Book Herald was growing and getting bigger, that like, hey, I should just do this and just start it, definitely I would have been in at an earlier stage of where comics YouTube was, to the point of, I would definitely just have a much bigger audience. That said, it also would have meant, I was doing YouTube stuff when I was like, 24, 25. And that could have ended badly. my opinions, my thoughts, my brain development, not as nuanced, not as far along as it is now. So, right, there could have been more issues. But enough about me. I see people commenting on the content. I do seriously appreciate that. It means a lot to me that people like it. I love that. It makes me want to come back and keep doing it. So let's see. What else do we got here? Dave, considering Days of Future Past and like stories, ergo how time travel creates alternate realities, how does X Lives make sense? Well, I mean, so like time travel doesn't necessarily create an alternate reality. Like, I think those are kind of two different things. It can potentially. I think with like the approach of X Lives of Wolverine is that Wolverine goes back in time along the same stretch of timeline, and that they are trying to act in such a way that his actions will not change anything that has happened in the future. Does this feel messy and like an imperfect way to do this? Yeah, because I mean, definitely like it's like the butterfly effect thing, right? The classic, like, okay, You have a situation where in the timeline as we know it, of present-day Krakoa, Professor X's parents gave birth to Professor X without a crazy man with claws killing the nursemaid. Now, that situation has happened. How does that change Charlie's parents? How does that change baby Charlie being raised and hearing that story growing up, right? There's a lot here that could influence the future, okay? Even without big things like characters being erased from existence and being killed and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I'm kind of with you that, like, they're not talking about the implications and the ramifications a heck of a lot. Is this actually branching a timeline where now we're going to have, and looking at Omega Sentinel in Inferno, where it's like timeline A, timeline B, now timeline C with Wolverine. Is that what we're going to start getting into? I mean, it just doesn't feel like that kind of comic. I don't know. We aren't really having those sorts of conversations. So I kind of think they want like the simplest version of time travel imaginable. And it's definitely got the energy of like, just don't think about it. Just don't worry about it. Which I don't know. Like because it's not really engaging with the conversation, it's easy, I suppose, to just not worry about it. But it is one of those things where it's like, time travel is a big part of a lot of Marvel Universe stuff. Like you said, alternate realities, Days of Future Past, all this stuff. You could engage with that more. So I would be into that, but definitely the story does not seem that engaged with playing with it. I told my students to listen to you for your pronunciations. Yeah, right. Like if you need to teach a child how to talk, send them my way, and I will hit names. I will hit words that you've never heard before. They will grow. Yeah, like, okay, so here Bill is just getting at what I was saying. Would Charles' father's discovery of mutant kind make him an important figure moving forward? Right, like that's what I'm getting at. I mean, now it's like, okay, they've been exposed to Wolverine and mutant kind, and they were not in the present day timeline. I don't know how you say that doesn't change anything. I just don't know how you get now to a future where it's like, oh yeah, nothing's changed. Like if this ends with Wolverine, killing Omega Red and stopping him. Or I guess more likely, I mean, it doesn't feel like the way this has to end is like with X-Force invading and stopping Mikhail and Omega Red in the present day. Because Wolverine stopping Omega Red doesn't stop this sort of endless cycle of perpetual time travel that those characters seem to have put themselves on, right? Like Omega Red is just bouncing along timelines, taking over all sorts of bodies. It seems like the only way to actually stop that is to stop Mikhail Rasputin in the present day with what I assume has to be Percy bringing in the X-Force card, right? And bringing in X-Force actually stopping it. So I'll be curious to see how that actually plays out. What else do we got? Theory. Romulus is part of the MCU Illuminati in the new Doctor Strange movie. That's hilarious. That is hilarious. Man, what a bombshell that would be. That would be the most shocking MCU moment of all time. Nothing would come close. Nothing would come close to them dropping a Romulus bomb in the new Doctor Strange movie. No chance. There is a 0.1% chance. I mean, I know how decimals work, that happens, but I love it. I love that you put that out there in the world. Do you miss putting out DC content? Not right now. Not especially. Most of the DC stuff I like right now is like Black Label or out of continuity stuff. Like I'm not real invested in continuity DC comics right now. And when I say I'm not real invested, like I'm not invested at all in continuity DC stuff. They've scaled it back. It's smaller. They're clearly going through editorial and creative turnover, which does, again, like it doesn't mean there's a lot of, like I said, like The Human Target has been one of my favorite comics of the year so far. So there's always going to be DC stuff that I'm enjoying. Catwoman Lonely City is awesome. I just read 10 issues of Catwoman Batman last night, which is not my favorite Tom King work, but like everything Tom King does, it's ambitious and it has big goals, and I appreciate the heck out of it for that. I appreciate that it's always trying to be something super special. Like that is actually something, I don't know how well it would work in the Krakoa era of X-Men, but like Tom King's approach to comics, I don't think he's a perfect writer. There's some of his stuff that I love. I love Mr. Miracle. I love Vision. I love Sheriff of Babylon, like everyone, right? I really thought Rorschach last year was like super strange and fascinating and like maybe great. I don't know yet. Still thinking about it. But that's a writer that is always, the ambition is always to write like the best, most interesting comic possible, to do things with form and content that are truly unique and that fit a story in certain ways. I'd like to see more of that energy from the X-Men creative staff, right? It's just exciting. It's just more fun to read comics like that. Even when they don't work, they're more interesting failures. I'm always pro that, just in comics in general. So, all right, let's see, what else do we got? Yeah, there's great questions coming in. Thanks everybody in the chat. Really appreciate it. Does Colossus remain affected after Mikhail's defeat? So Mikhail does reference here that Colossus is Team Russia under their influence right now. So that's actually an interesting question, right? So if we're going to talk about the way X Lives has to end is with X-Force or whatever stopping Mikhail Rasputin, which therefore stops Omega Red's traveling through time, which kind of has to happen, right? Like, what is the version of Wolverine, like, what, he's going to kill Omega Red so hard in someone else's body that he stops traveling through time? Like, that doesn't really seem like an option right now. So if that happens, and they stop Mikhail, does then his influence... See, I think probably what happens, here's my theory, is X-Force is going to go in, they're going to break up the time travel party, they're going to take Mikhail prisoner, he's going to come and be the prisoner of X-Force, but they're not going to know about his influence with the Chronicler and the influence of Colossus. He's still going to have his mole on the inside, so like I don't think it will immediately change the fact that he's got, Colossus in his pocket, essentially, right? Yeah, okay. Let's see. All right, cool. So keep the questions coming. X-Men number 8 is the other comic that came out today. We got writer Jerry Duggan, artist Javier Pina, colors by Marty Gracia, letters by Clayton Coles. So, I mean, this is X-Men at its most basic, definitely. It's just the X-Men go on a cruise ship and they fight MODOK and AIM. That's the story. The saving grace is, one, Javier Pina with Marty Gracia. It's better with Pepe Larraz, but like Javier Pina and Marty Gracia doing great work. Nice looking comic. And I think the second thing is like these are good characters. There's some development on Synch and Laura's relationship after the Vault, after the classic X-Men number 19, which is good. It's handled well. If you care about these characters, you like just seeing them interact, you like Synch, you like Laura, it's a nice issue. Here's the thing. Talk about this a little bit up front. Duggan writes Marvel superhero comics like the majority of writers do. And if you compare this to the other Team Marvel Universe books, like I said, X-Men's at the top. It's not the best, but it's at the top. The thing with X-Men is like it's accomplishing its goals that it set for itself extremely well, much like X Lives of Wolverine. As the title that Hickman used to write, I miss the big ideas. I miss the mystery. I miss the feeling that each new issue could be one of the best X-Men comics I've ever read. Instead, it's all like pretty solid. It's pretty solid. I would not be keeping up with it on a month-by-month basis if I wasn't probably talking about it. It's a series that I would eventually go and maybe I'd check out on Marvel Unlimited, see how good it was, decide, okay, no, this isn't best of the year material, I'll move on to something else. Like, that's where X-Men is at, I think. They're just doing kind of a Marvel superhero team universe Gambit. They're not Gambit, he's not on the team. They're taking down Nightmare, they're taking down MODOK, they got the High Evolutionary. There's some interesting threads. Here, like everything, like the Krakoan for the next issue reads Orcus. I'm interested in what Duggan is developing here with Orcus. I thought the issue with Sunfire and Arako was really good. So there's some moments in here that I think are very effective. We had a thing going with Ben Urich was going to expose mutant resurrection potentially because he had the secrets of Cyclops. He got his memory wiped. We find out here that was actually by Synch, utilizing Jean Grey's powers. We had for a minute like a mystery of who's Captain Krakoa. It's obviously Cyclops. He's pretending to be Captain Krakoa because they're now trying to mask the fact that like, okay, Cyclops like publicly died, so we can't just like be out there because then people know about resurrection. I think the most interesting thing that Duggan's doing right now is just kind of like what are his plans for Orcus, and sort of these newer characters and like the space traveling genetically engineered human who's like claimed Mars's moon and stuff like that. That stuff's pretty interesting. That's unique and that's different, and that's kind of like Krakoa specific stuff that I'm engaged with. So it's definitely not bad. It's not a bad comic. But I come away from these issues pretty nonplussed and wishing there was more to it. But again, like this is not going to be this book. And frankly, it's probably not going to be anything Duggan does, right? Like we know who he is as a writer right now, right? Like he did Marauders, he did Cable, now he's doing X-Men. You got a nice sample size here of what the material is going to be. And it's going to be pretty light on its feet. It's going to let the artist shine. And it is going to not dig into, but just give fun moments for some of these characters that you may or may not enjoy. So I think like it's going to continue to be fun. And if for a lot of readers, they're like, yeah, that's exactly what I want. Like I just want a nice, fun X-Men superhero book again. Cool. That's what you're going to get. That's what this book is going to be. You know, I think if it's in a line where Immortal X-Men is doing the Quiet Council politics and some of the big ideas, and Al Ewing X-Men Red is doing the cosmic and the big ideas, right? And New Mutants is doing thematic explorations of what's actually going on with the citizens. X-Men can be a nice middle. It can be a nice supporting player. You know, it's like I talked about. Like X-Men it's not the flagship book now. It's like a good, not even a sixth man. It's like a nice seventh man off the bench, right? Like this is a nice seventh man off the bench. They're going to get playoff minutes. They can put up 8 to 16 every night. You know, maybe they have a huge game. They hit 5 threes and it saves a playoff game for you. That's X-Men right now. It's not one of your star players. And that can be okay if everything else is clicking in the Destiny of X. But we will see. All right. So let's see. What else do we got? Okay. So, you know, the other development here in X-Men that is mildly interesting is Forge is building mutant armor suits. If it's on the prompter, I'm going to read it. That's one of my few notes, which is pretty interesting if you think about them in terms of like mutant Iron Man armors. Like, is Forge now building Iron Man armors for all of mutant kind? And he says here, it's like, you know, it's for the ones who like need defenses, right? Like for the individuals who are not Wolverine and aren't going to heal themselves, or are not like a trained soldier, you know, like Cyclops. That's an interesting idea. You know, that's another thing that actually pushes the Krakoa era forward, where it's like, yeah, mutants don't go out in public in the real world, or the non-Krakoa world, if they're not going to have this armor, you know, kind of thing, right? And now it's like, okay, like again, it's just another thing that changes status quo, changes dynamics, etc., etc. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the MODOK comedy in this issue kind of missed too. I think that's probably part of the problem. Like, if this book's gonna be fun on its feet, like, great. But it kind of needs to nail that. And it like Hellions was a laugh out loud funny comic book, which I talk about over and over again, how uncommon that is, how hard that is. X-Men is definitely not that, right? Like, I'd rather watch the Jordan Bloom, Patton Oswalt, MODOK show on Hulu any day, you know? And so it's just like, I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. But fine is kind of boring a lot of times, right? So, all right, let's see. Do we have any final questions with what's going on? I'm Ron Burgundy. I see here in the chat, definitely had one of those moments. You know, it's better to have those moments on the Casual Krakoa live stream, because, you know, I can walk it back. The problem, that it's much harder if I've actually written it out on a PowerPoint when I'm doing my actual Kraken Krakoa videos, because then I'm on such a tight timeline trying to do, you know, 15 minutes or whatever all in one go. And like, here's the thing about Kraken Krakoa, and I joke about this all the time, I'm just not going to edit those. I don't want to. I do all of the reading in one. I do it with slides. They're running everything. Basically, I'm doing it live. Everything you see in a Kraken Krakoa video is me giving a live presentation. And if I happen to mistype suits as sweets and I say sweets, I'm going to have to correct myself and then not, and just keep going. That's how Kraken Krakoa is definitely going to go. So, secrets of the trade from someone wondering why they don't have more subscribers. Pretty easy to see. So, all right, let's see. Do we have any final questions here? I'm going to take a sip. I'm gonna relax the throat. If you got any questions, let me know. I'm seeing the question here, can you imagine Patton Oswalt reading MODOK's lines? Well, yeah, because he's MODOK on the Hulu show. So yeah, like that's the voice I hear now. That show's not like the best, but enjoyable. Enjoyable. Is Hulu's MODOK better than X-Men? Not the concept, the series. That's a tough one. I only watched like 3-4 episodes. Maybe if I finish, I'll know for sure. What are you expecting from Day of Judgment this summer? Judgment Day, I think, will be relatively good as events goes because Kieran Gillen is heading it, because he is writing Immortal X-Men and Eternals, 2 series that are going to play into it. Again, my rule of thumb for events is if it spirals out of a run by a creator that I like and trust, and that run's already good, it's probably going to be an okay event at minimum. That's what I expect from Judgment Day. So I think it'll be interesting. Again, there's a lot of like anger already at like, oh my gosh, Druig said mutants are deviants, and you know that's a problem. Like, wait and see. like promo stuff is not the time to get angry. If they actually do that, we'll talk about it. I probably don't love it if that happens. But yeah, Judgment Day I think will be fine. Like I'm actually semi-excited to engage with it. Yeah, I think it'll be good because Eternals is really good. I want people to read more of that. And again, like that'll mean we're in the thick of the Destiny of X, so we'll see what Immortal X-Men wants to be, which I think will be fun. What about the Immortal X-Men name drop? By that, you just mean that Ben Urich apparently came up with the name Immortal X-Men. Is that what we're talking about? In the pages of X-Men. Yeah, good on Ben. Like, give Ben credit. Ben Urich, definitely. I am confident Ben Urich has not gotten enough credit as the journalist that we all know and love throughout their career. So yes, give Ben Urich his shine on the good naming of Immortal X-Men. Way to go. So Namor and Xavier are on bad terms even though they were in the Illuminati. That is true. Fun fact, most characters who were in the Illuminati hate each other. Or at least have severe reservations about one another. They are not pals, even in the moment, but definitely now, right? Like Namor and Black Panther have, a nationwide blood feud. Professor X, and Namor is unique because Namor's in a weird place, and I've talked about this a bunch. But Namor goes in and out of I want to flood the world phases, and for the last handful of years, he's mostly been in an I want to flood the world phase. So it's tough to know exactly what his reservations are with Professor X. They could be way more detailed, or it just says more about where Namor's at in his life. But yeah, I mean, Professor X doesn't have a heck of an in with anyone on the Illuminati. Obviously we've seen that throughout the Krakoa era, where him and Magneto go and they, strip Reed Richards' memories from his mind, right? It's not like Professor X is having heart-to-hearts with Tony Stark. Who knows? Maybe he's having psychic chats with Black Bolt and Nightly. Maybe. We haven't seen Black Bolt in years. Who am I missing? Doctor Strange obviously has reservations with everything going on in Krakoa. So yeah, like I am. So the one thing I was thinking about after the possible Illuminati drop in the Doctor Strange trailer, right? So the Doctor Strange trailer came out this past weekend during the Super Bowl, and everybody got super excited because there's an image of like 6 chairs and the voice seemingly of Patrick Stewart, right? And everyone's like, oh, okay, that's going to be Professor X, right? So maybe a multiversal version of Professor X in Multiverse Madness. Certainly, I was not expecting that. That's incredibly exciting. I really hope that happens. The Illuminati being a multiversal Illuminati is going to be fun as hell. Like, that's a great idea. So it did get me thinking, though, about like, okay, in terms of the Illuminati, obviously you read the Bendis run of like 5 or 6 issues, which I really loved at the time. Like those were some of my favorite getting into 2000s Marvel Comics, just the idea of like, oh, all these big players like came together and sort of like planned the world in secret. What a cool concept. And then obviously Bendis walks so Hickman can run. Hickman runs with the Illuminati concept in the pages of his New Avengers primarily, and then the New Avengers crossover building up to Secret Wars in 2015. the crazy thing about that, in retrospect, is Professor X doesn't get to be a part of the Hickman Illuminati because it comes right after Avengers vs. X-Men when a Phoenix possessed Scott Summers killed Papa Professor. Okay? So Hickman's Illuminati are without the only member of the Illuminati, the original Illuminati who we see in the Bendis run, who they are missing is Professor X. He gets replaced by Mutant Kind with Beast, which in retrospect makes sense in terms of the progression of Beast as this morally bankrupt defender of mutant kind, but also like Beast gets no good moments. I haven't reread New Avengers super recently, but I have no memories of any good Beast content in that run. Okay, I don't think it exists. There's better Professor X moments with multiversal Professor X than anything to do with Beast, but I do think in retrospect, like, man, if Avengers vs. X-Men hadn't ended on that beat of taking Professor X off the board, how much more interesting would Hickman's New Avengers have been with Professor X on this rendition of the Illuminati? Real missed opportunity to see. But I am curious too, like, the biggest miss for me of this entire era of X-Men is, oh man, reimagine what we know now with past Marvel events, right? So like, as Professor X is on the Illuminati, he's thinking about planning Krakoa. He's working with Moira in secret. How does that stuff intersect? I want some of that behind the scenes in terms of like, okay, knowing what we know now about Moira, about the plans for Krakoa, how do these moments from past Marvel comics change? I think that would be super fun to explore and see. Are we likely to? Who knows? Because there's no book doing that. No book is doing that at all. Will any of them finally take it and run with it? I hope we see it in the Destiny of X. There's still time. All right. Beast playing chess. Yes, Beast does play chess. Multiple mentions of Beast playing chess in the Time Runs Out, I believe is when that happens, with Beast and Hulk have a conversation playfully. Shield is watching them. Yes, I know what you're talking about. That is Beast's best moment. Playing chess with the Hulk. True story. That is his peak in New Avengers. Glad we can all agree on that. Anything else? Okay, I'm gonna give everybody like one more minute for questions, and then we'll probably call it. It says, what's the huge storm beats that have been hinted at? Well, I think it was becoming queen of the solar system. I'm pretty sure it was Storm becoming Region of Sol was the big storm beat that was hinted at. Obviously, there was that Hickman interview where he was like, yeah, she was going to have a kid with T'Challa, and that kid was going to get raised in the world in the future, and that didn't happen. But I'm pretty sure the big storm beat was being Regent of Sol and sort of taking over Arakko. Is there more to that? I don't know. Is it going to get even bigger than that? I guess that would be interesting. I mean, I would still would love to see a Storm solo, which in some ways is kind of what like Sword. You could tell Sword sort of wanted to get into that with Al Ewing, and maybe it's going to be a part of X-Men Red certainly. I don't. It just seems like there's enough going on with Storm that she could have her own book. She's literally the queen of the solar system. I feel like there could be more there, but we'll see. Man, the love for that Beast chess game is killing me. All right. Good job, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Which Arakko character should join the Avengers? Well, obviously, Iska would be the coolest, because Iska is the coolest. Who else? Not Tarn the Uncaring. Definitely not. Iska on the Avengers would be... It wouldn't make sense, though. It wouldn't make sense, right? The whole ethos of Arakko right now, like, precludes any of them on the Avengers. I think what we need to learn is, like, who's the Arakko mutant who's like, hey, this way of life and this sort of brutality is not for me. Who's the one who has a different sensibility? I mean, again, like I'm talking about stuff that is still on the table. Like, how about just all of Arakko being explored in so much more detail? Getting to know so many more of these characters. I feel like the best Avenger, the best Arakkan Avenger we haven't met yet. Like I feel like it hasn't happened. Have you read Thor recently or Venom? No, I'm behind on both of those books. I have plans to catch up on Venom sooner rather than later because I want to see what Ewing and Ron V are doing on that. I love both those creators, but I'm definitely behind on all that stuff. I checked out on the Kate's Thor. I had a, like, I actually think, so the first arc disappointed me. I actually think it's been getting better as it went. But I probably haven't read since the Don Blake stuff kind of came to a conclusion, so I'm behind on that one as well. Let's see, what else? Did Reckoning War affect the Summers home on the moon? I don't I don't expect anything that happens in Reckoning War to get, well, you know what? I was gonna say to get referenced at all in X-Men comics, but Dan Slott did his thing with Franklin Richards in Fantastic Four, and obviously that had ramifications. So is Summers home destroyed? I don't know. I'm not caught up on Reckoning War yet either. I'll probably revisit that once it finishes just to sort of see what the deal is. But not something I'm super invested in. The Burning Heart Lady, yeah. What's her name? Ahura? Something like that? It's not Ashoka? What's her name? Yeah, of the Burning Heart, whoever she is on the Sword team. She's the only one who's like been on a team so far, so I guess she's kind of the Avenger by default. She is a cool character. I definitely agree. Okay, cool. Thanks everybody for the questions. Much appreciated. Thanks to those of you who joined live. I will be back here next Wednesday, assuming that there are any good X-Men comics to talk about. We got an issue of X-Deaths coming out, X-Deaths number 3, so I have to think there's going to be something to talk about there. What else comes next week? Oh, there's going to be an X-Men Devil's Reign tie-in. That's going to be issue number 2 in that series. So, yeah, we'll be back here. So like, subscribe to the channel, all that fun stuff. Cora, thank you. Cora, I like the legend. Legend of the Burning Heart. Thanks for that reminder there. But seriously, thanks everybody for listening. You can find all my stuff at comicbookherald.com, at Comic Book Herald on Twitter and Instagram. And I'll be back next week here on the YouTube channel. So thanks for listening. And as always, enjoy the comics.